What if I told you that behind the headlines, beyond the noise of war and diplomacy, a quiet unraveling is taking place? One that no one dares to talk about. This isn't just about politics. It's not just about borders or bombs. This is about the unseen price of power, a story not of military might, but of economic freefall, of billions being lost silently, daily, of a nation caught between survival and self-destruction. While the world watches the smoke rise, very few are asking, what's burning underneath? In the next few minutes, we're going to strip away the layers. We'll go beyond the surface and into the shadows, where numbers speak louder than slogans, and silence is more dangerous than bullets. If you care about truth, if you believe in justice, and if you're ready to see what most of the world refuses to confront, then stay with me. Because this story could change how you see everything. This is the reality no one is talking about. Let's begin. Israel's military spending has surged to unprecedented levels since the outbreak of war in October 2023. Faced with multi-front threats from Hamas in Gaza to Hezbollah in the north and rising tensions in the West Bank, the Israeli government authorized emergency defense allocations exceeding $20 billion. 0 cents. This comes on top of an already large annual military budget, making 2023-2025 some of the most expensive years in Israel's defense history. The Israeli Defense Forces IDF called up hundreds of thousands of reservists, a costly move not just in terms of salaries and operational logistics, but also in lost productivity, as these reservists were pulled out of key industries, including tech, medicine, and academia. This escalation isn't limited to combat operations. Israel has poured billions into expanding Iron Dome batteries, funding ground operations in Gaza, building military infrastructure, and supporting northern evacuations and defensive lines near Lebanon. Every day of prolonged conflict adds more weight to the fiscal strain. The cost per day of fighting in Gaza alone is estimated at over $150 million, 0 cents, not counting the additional strain of maintaining alert levels across other borders. These expenses have forced Israel's finance ministry to make politically unpopular moves, including cutting budgets from civilian sectors like education, housing, and public health to reroute funds to defense. Subsidies have been reduced, inflation is rising, and public debt is growing. Economists within Israel have warned of a deepening deficit crisis by the end of 2025 if the trajectory continues. The Bank of Israel has also issued cautious statements about the weakening shekel and the growing pressure on the central bank's reserves due to war volatility. Yet despite these warning signs, the government continues its open wallet approach, heavily prioritizing military objectives over financial sustainability. This decision, while deemed necessary by national security officials, has created internal debates about the long-term implications. Defense contractors are booming while small and medium-sized businesses are closing under the weight of wartime taxes, disrupted supply chains, and a shrinking consumer base. The government's insistence on maintaining wartime readiness on all fronts has created what some experts describe as an economic hemorrhage. For a country whose economy thrives on stability, innovation, and foreign confidence, this level of military expenditure is no longer just a response to conflict. It's a strategic gamble that may cost more than just billions. The ongoing conflict has paralyzed large segments of Israel's economy, disrupting both the public and private sectors in ways that are compounding by the month. One of the most immediate effects has been a nationwide slowdown in business activity, especially in cities like Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Jerusalem. Economic hubs that were once symbols of Israel's tech-driven growth, offices remain half empty as thousands of employees have been drafted into military service, and many more are dealing with the psychological toll of living in a country at war. The energy and rhythm of Israel's famed startup nation are fading under the pressure of uncertainty and constant alert. Inflation has crept upward, driven by increased government spending, supply chain disruptions, and currency devaluation. The shekel, once considered a strong and stable regional currency, has weakened against major global currencies. As prices for food, rent, and utilities rise, consumer confidence has dropped sharply. Families are saving rather than spending, businesses are holding off on expansion, and investors are growing wary of instability that shows no signs of resolution. Meanwhile, the government's wartime economic policies are mostly reactive, focused on short-term survival rather than long-term stabilization. Another major blow to the economic engine is the growing trend of brain drain. Highly educated young professionals, especially in the tech, healthcare, and academic sectors, are emigrating or actively exploring relocation. Countries like Germany, the Netherlands, and Canada have reported increased visa applications from Israelis in 2024 and 2025, many of whom cite the collapsing sense of safety, political instability, and lack of future prospects as key reasons. When top talent begins to leave, it creates a vacuum that is not easily filled, especially in high-skill sectors that depend on innovation and continuity. Universities and research institutions are also suffering as war shutdowns have disrupted academic calendars and driven international collaborators away. Many foreign students and faculty have pulled out of exchange programs or fellowships. Internally, budgets for research and development are being slashed in favor of emergency spending, which further distances the country from its long-standing commitment to scientific progress and tech competitiveness. Israel's economic vitality once depended on its ability to fuse innovation, human capital, and geopolitical resilience. That formula is now breaking down. As the war drags on, the loss of talent and internal paralysis could set back the nation's economic trajectory by years, if not decades. Israel's tourism and investment sectors, once vital lifelines of its economy, have suffered a devastating collapse since the eruption of conflict in October 2023. Before the war, tourism alone contributed over $8 billion annually to Israel's GDP, drawing millions of visitors to its historical and religious sites, Mediterranean beaches, and vibrant cities. But now, that industry lies in shambles. Major airlines have either suspended or significantly reduced flights to Tel Aviv, while international travel advisories warn against visiting the region. Hotels that once boasted high occupancy rates are operating at a fraction of their capacity or have been repurposed to house displaced families and reservists. Tour guides, restaurant owners, and small business operators tied to the tourism ecosystem have been left without income, many forced to shut down permanently. International events, cultural festivals, and tech conferences have been canceled or relocated to safer countries, pulling not only visitors but also vital streams of business-to-business engagement. Israel's image as a thriving and modern destination has been replaced by daily headlines of destruction, displacement, and instability. Whatever that shift in perception is not only hurting short-term revenue, but also long-term trust in Israel as a stable environment for international collaboration and leisure. Foreign direct investment, another cornerstone of Israel's economy, is in steep decline. In the years leading up to the war, Israel was one of the top destinations for global venture capital, especially in cybersecurity, medical technology, and AI. But since the war began, many investors have pulled out, fearing the unpredictable security situation and the potential for further regional escalation. Major deals have been paused or canceled, and several multinational companies have moved operations or paused hiring in Israel. The shekel has weakened significantly, driven not only by military spending but also by diminished investor confidence. Market volatility has been exacerbated by growing concerns about judicial reforms and domestic political instability, which many see as compounding the risk of doing business in Israel. The real estate markets, once booming with foreign capital and speculative interests, are also cooling rapidly. Construction has slowed in key areas, and commercial properties are facing rising vacancies as companies reduce their presence or close entirely. All these developments feed into a broader financial narrative. Israel, once seen as a resilient, high-growth economy, is now being perceived by the global financial community as a high-risk environment, where economic returns are uncertain and long-term stability is in doubt. In the face of mounting economic pressure and the staggering cost of sustained military conflict, U.S. financial aid has emerged as both a critical support beam and a complex burden for Israel. Following the outbreak of war in late 2023, the United States approved over $14 billion, 0 cents in emergency military assistance to Israel, adding to the nearly $4 billion, 0 cents it already provides annually. These funds have been used to replenish missile defense systems like the Iron Dome, restock ammunition, purchase advanced weaponry, and support logistics for the Israeli Defense Forces. On the surface, this lifeline has allowed Israel to maintain its military momentum and project strength despite an economy under enormous strain. However, beneath the surface, this dependence is breeding a quiet but growing vulnerability. Israel's national budget has increasingly tilted toward defense spending, and the flow of American aid enables this imbalance to persist without immediate domestic consequences. Civil services such as healthcare, housing, education, and infrastructure face cuts, yet the military continues to expand, propped up by foreign dollars. This artificial support masks the underlying weaknesses in Israel's fiscal structure, creating the illusion of financial stability where there is actually deepening fragility. Politically, the reliance on U.S. aid introduces another layer of complexity. While the Israeli government presents itself as a sovereign regional power, the reality is that its military operations, particularly in Gaza and the West Bank, are now closely watched and, in some cases, implicitly shaped by American expectations. The aid comes with strings. Whether acknowledged or not, Washington's political climate, its shifting public opinion, and rising calls from within Congress to reassess unconditional support have all placed new pressure on Israel. This dependence makes Israel vulnerable to the policy winds of another nation, a reality that contradicts the image of unshakable independence it seeks to project. Furthermore, the perception of Israel as a heavily subsidized military actor affects its global standing. In parts of Europe and the global South, this dynamic has shifted the conversation from one of partnership to one of critique. Economic sovereignty, once a hallmark of Israel's success story, is quietly slipping away as the country becomes ever more reliant on external financial injections to maintain internal stability and external strength. This silent erosion is rarely addressed in mainstream narratives, but has significant implications for Israel's long-term resilience and geopolitical autonomy. The financial cost of maintaining the occupation through military enforcement, settlement expansion, and the administration of a divided population remains one of Israel's most underreported and strategically ignored economic burdens. Each year, billions are quietly funneled into sustaining infrastructure in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem, funding security operations, and supporting civilian settlements that often require isolated water lines, electricity grids, roads, and protected transportation routes. These costs are rarely itemized transparently in national budgets, making the full economic impact of the occupation difficult to trace. But experts estimate that this hidden economy drains significant public resources that could otherwise be invested in domestic social services, innovation, and economic development. The Israeli Defense Forces maintain a permanent and costly presence in Palestinian territories, including checkpoints, watchtowers, patrol units, and surveillance technologies. The labor and logistics required to manage this network are enormous. Beyond direct military expenditures, the civil administration in these areas demands Israeli oversight in legal, zoning, and municipal frameworks, an inefficient and duplicated bureaucracy that consumes both manpower and funds. The frequent flare-ups of violence and the need for emergency military campaigns only add to the cost, as seen in repeated operations in Jenin, Nablus, and other West Bank cities, which require millions of dollars in tactical support each time conflict erupts. Meanwhile, settlement construction not only inflames geopolitical tensions, but also pulls money from state coffers into projects often opposed by the international community. These settlements are subsidized heavily, with the Israeli government providing tax benefits, infrastructure investments, and public services to incentivize Jewish Israelis to move into contested areas. These incentives come at the expense of development within Israel proper, diverting funds from underfunded communities, especially in the periphery. The long-term economic return on these settlements is negligible, yet the financial commitment is ongoing and compounding. Adding another layer of cost is the international backlash. The economic consequences of boycotts, divestment campaigns, and growing scrutiny from European institutions create barriers to trade, academic collaboration, and foreign investment. Israel is increasingly viewed not just as a conflict zone, but as a state engaged in costly policies that alienate allies and drain resources. The occupation is not only a political and moral debate, it is a significant economic liability. Yet because it's entwined with national identity and security narratives, the true financial toll is rarely confronted in public discourse, allowing a multi-billion-dollar drain to persist in silence. While Israel's economy faces mounting pressure from war spending, talent loss, and investor flight, the international media largely remains fixated on the visible and immediate drama of military conflict. Headlines are dominated by explosions, ceasefire negotiations, and political posturing, but the slow bleed of Israel's financial infrastructure is rarely addressed with the same urgency. The silence isn't accidental. It reflects both media priorities and the geopolitical sensitivities surrounding Israel's global alliances. Economic decline doesn't make for explosive footage, and dissecting Israel's internal fragilities could challenge long-standing narratives of invincibility, stability, and strategic dominance in the region. News outlets often focus on Israel's technological edge or its military precision, offering an image of a nation in control. But that image is increasingly at odds with economic data showing a different story. A nation burning through reserves, slashing civilian budgets, and struggling to sustain its social contract. Mainstream coverage rarely questions how long Israel can continue to fund a multi-front conflict or what it means for a country to survive on emergency aid while gutting education, healthcare, and housing. Instead, the world is told Israel remains strong, unshaken, resilient, even as the financial cracks widen beneath the surface. This lack of attention also shields external actors from accountability. For example, U.S. and European governments continue to provide economic and military support without facing hard questions about whether their aid is enabling an unsustainable fiscal model. The media's failure to probe the economic dimension of the conflict ensures that difficult conversations about foreign influence, long-term viability, and internal Israeli dissent remain off the table. Without public scrutiny, policies that are financially disastrous in the long term are allowed to pass without challenge. The silence also prevents ordinary Israelis from fully grasping the depth of the crisis. When media avoids highlighting economic decay, there is little pressure on policymakers to pivot. There is no collective reckoning with what the war is costing not only in lives, but in the future of Israel's economy. The broader public, both inside and outside Israel, is left uninformed about the shifting realities beneath the war headline. And while the bombs get coverage, the budgets get buried. This media silence creates a dangerous illusion of control, even as the country's economic foundation weakens with every passing month of conflict. Ladies and gentlemen, we often speak of war in terms of weapons, borders, and ideologies. But behind every missile fired and every speech given, there is a quieter war being waged. A war on economic stability, on civil life, on a nation's future. Israel, for decades seen as a fortress of resilience and innovation, is now quietly bleeding billions through relentless military expenditure, paralyzed industries, a fleeing talent pool, and a deepening dependence on foreign aid. Its occupation policies cost more than what they secure. Its global partnerships are eroding. And yet, the world watches in silence, captivated by conflict but blind to collapse. This silence must break, not out of hatred or blame, but out of responsibility to truth, to justice, and to the millions on both sides of the wall who deserve a future that isn't financed by fear. The cost of war isn't just paid in blood. It's paid in budgets, in broken trust, in lost generations. And if we are bold enough to look past the smoke, we'll see that what's unraveling in Israel today isn't just its economy, it's the very illusion that such a course can be sustained forever. To truly understand the future of Israel must not only ask what it is fighting against, but what it is bleeding for. Thank you. Good luck. May truth guide your thoughts. May compassion sharpen your vision. And may you never stop asking the questions the world is too afraid to answer.